Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Jeffrey Panettiere. I'm a library technical assistant at the Wilson Library. And my colleague Emmett is also here. Emmett is a library aide at the Mitchell branch. And then this is Book Sandwich In. It's our kind of afternoon author talk that we've been doing. We've repurposed the original program from an in-person event we used to do. And we've now kind of been using it to talk to authors we're excited about that we wouldn't maybe otherwise get a chance to have in the building. And so today we're joined by Nadina LaSpina. She is a Italian-American disability rights activist, teacher, author. She's been active in the disability rights movement for over 40 years, and not just the disability rights movement, but in other movements over the course of her life. And you can find her in the streets with Disabled in Action, ADAPT, the Disability Caucus, and many other groups and causes. So after teaching Italian for many years, Nadina created and taught courses in disability studies at the new school. I just found out that she was one of the first to teach online courses over 21 years ago. So this technology that we've all been able to benefit from is something that Nadina was kind of an early pioneer of.
Except that now I've been left behind.
And so her first book, which we're here to discuss, is called Such a Pretty Girl, a story of struggle, empowerment, and disability pride. It's a memoir of her life and activism. And it was named one of the best books of 2019 by the American Library Association book list. It's the reason why we're here today. So welcome, Nadina. And I'll, for those who are hard of, hearing, we do have captioning, and for those who would have, issues being able to see, I'll describe myself first, and then everybody can introduce themselves. I am a young, white, cisgendered male with short hair and a blue shirt with palm trees on it. And I'm sitting in the only room that doesn't have people in the library, and there's a blank white wall behind me and fluorescent lighting. So I'll let the next person introduce themselves.
Sure. Thank you so much. Should I'll describe myself. I'm a white woman, though I am Sicilian, and in Sicily I'm not really considered white. We're called Africans, and I have long, messy, wavy, gray hair, which has been getting longer and more gray with the pandemic. And I am talking to you from Florida. But my home is really in New York City. But I came here and got stuck when I was hit by a car a couple of months ago.
This is Emmett speaking, the other library staff member. I'm joining the call from my home office. So there's a mysterious portrait of a large, elegant woman behind me on my wall. And I'm wearing big red headphones. I'm a Caucasian person with dark hair that's up in a bun behind my head, and I'm wearing tortoiseshell glasses and a black t-shirt. And also joining us is Leslie Heller.
Hi, I'm Leslie Heller. I am a 61-year-old white cisgendered woman, and you probably can't see it, but I also have a disability. Just thought I'd throw that in there. And I'm a longtime friend of Nadina's.
Great, thank you, everybody. So I'll just start. I started hearing about Nadina's book from really different people in different parts of my life who were part of different communities that I was either in or sort of close to. I first started hearing about it from Italian and Sicilian American writers, many of whom were women and feminists who knew Nadina and were talking about her book. And then I started hearing about it from friends who were in the disability community and who really appreciated the book for its rejection of the idea that in order to be happy, you can't be disabled, or that you have to somehow be cured of your disability in order to lead a happy life. And then I started hearing about it just from different people who were activists in different movements in general. So it was cool to see it being embraced by different communities, and then to finally read it and see how, you know, Nadina has been kind of involved in all these different moments historically, and including ones that didn't necessarily directly affect her, but so yeah, that's how I found out about the book. I will let everybody know that the library does offer a physical copy of her book in case you wanted to check it out. We also, through the website and app Hoopla, which you can use with your New Haven Free Public Library card, we have the audiobook, so you could listen to it through there as well. And there's kind of unlimited copies of that. So let's maybe just start out kind of generally. This is a memoir that covers, you know, over 40 years of your life. How did you start to write this book? What was your kind of process? At what moment did you decide that you needed to write this?
I did not start out thinking, okay, I'm going to write a memoir. I found myself writing about my life now and then when I had the time. And in a way, at first, it felt like self-indulgence because, well, I was teaching, I was busy, you know, I had a lot of other work to do, and I was an activist. With my husband, we were New York City Adapt. Adapt is this grassroots group, national group, but we don't even call it an organization because we don't have a president, a board. And we used to get calls in the middle of the night. There were people that were in nursing homes, and we had to try and get them out of nursing homes. And I was going to demonstrations, and I was getting arrested, and I had to get up early in the morning and go teach. So I mean, there was so much that I had to do that it was like taking a little break. But I found myself really wanting to do it and writing more and more about my life, and people telling me, you know, you should write a memoir, you should write about your life. And I kept writing, and at a certain point, but I mean, it was, it went on for many years. I thought, well, let me take a look and see what I got here. And I had over 400 single-space pages. And I didn't know what to do, you know, how to put it together. And that was the real work. Decided I needed a little help from an editor. And the first thing he said to me was, you have more characters here than there are in War and Peace. I didn't want anybody to feel left out. So I put the names of all my friends all in there, you know, all the people from the movement that I knew and loved. I mean, really cared about, but I had to cut it, and cutting is very difficult. Cutting it and making it into a cohesive this object that's going to be a book. So that was the hardest part, and that took me a number of years. I would say I was ready, actually. Then I had a lot of trouble getting a publisher because I was originally going to publish with the university press, and then I got an agent, and I thought I knocked out. Got an agent, and she told me she could get me a major publisher because this was really, really good. She read it overnight, but it didn't work out that way because it wasn't the right time, I guess, for disability stories to come out, and I kept getting rejected, and that's awful. That is, if there are writers here listening, that's you. You feel like, okay, I give up. I'm no good. If nobody wants this, it must not be any good. And it's hard to try and tell yourself, no, I know it's good. I worked hard on this. But when you get rejected, so at a certain point, I kind of, said, all right, I'm going to leave it alone. Well, my agent had 2 heart attacks and she was forced to retire. So I thought, well, maybe it's not meant to be this book. And then out of the blue, I got an agent. I got a publisher, New Village Press, which is really a partner of New York University Press. So that's why that's how you find the book. No, New York University Press. And that's it. I ended up with a book, but I wasn't. The one thing that made me feel that it would be good to have this, to have this into a book, was that I was using, I'm sure in the course when I was teaching, because I was teaching, as you said, I started teaching disability studies. For many years, I was teaching Italian, by the way. That's my other identity. I was born in, since I was born and raised in Italy. I would be talking about my life to show, to make a point, to show how ableism hurts, how what people say about you, or the way they act around you can be very hurtful. And that's when I would really get a response from my students, much more than if I was just talking in the abstract when I was talking about my life. So I thought, well, it's not really self-indulgence. It can do some good. And I'm glad I wrote it. And I love to write. I'm still writing, and hopefully it will be fiction next.
So in the book, it's not just about you, it's about the history of this movement as well. When you started writing it, did you find that there was much out there written about the history of the disability rights movement?
They were starting to, definitely. Well, when I first started, there wasn't much, but there was people were starting to publish. They were the academic books that were once disability studies, and this is Irving Zola, who's now dead, died many years ago, started the Society for Disability Studies, and tried to get disability studies courses to be taught in universities where disability was not seen as a medical problem, which is the way in the past it was seen, you know, but as a social construct. In fact, we talked about the social model. When I find the movement, and I can read actually a little bit about how it felt when I found the movement. I was going to start by reading a little bit from the very beginning, from Riposto, also because of that part, talking about Riposto. In 1998, I gave a keynote at the University of Southern Connecticut. And I started talking about Riposto, and Riposto as this, not just as the place of my birth and my childhood, but as a metaphor of this place where we can all, those of us who are born disabled, become disabled early in childhood, or become disabled at any time in their lives, can find themselves in, where you feel that people just feel sorry for you, and you don't think there's much of a future. You don't have much to live for now that you're disabled, and that you feel isolated. You think you're the only one, so Riposto, you know, like I used it that way in that when I did that keynote, and throughout the book I do that when I bring in Riposto at times, you know, when things are not going well in my life and I'm really disappointed, sad, angry. I mean, there are some bad things that happen to me. I don't want to give any of it away. I want people to read the book. I, bring in Riposto. So I'll start and then I'll go to the movement. So I'll start with the first sentence in the book is, when I was 4 or 5, I wanted to be ugly, and got very angry when people said I was pretty. I'm ugly, brutta. Say that I'm ugly, but no one listened to me. Che bella bambina, what a pretty little girl, they all said. And inevitably they added, che peccato, what a shame. There was such sorrow in their voices, such an anguish to look on their faces. I didn't want my being pretty to make people sad. Better to be ugly, I thought. I especially didn't want my being pretty to make my mother sad. As soon as she heard those words, even if she had been laughing a minute before, my mother's eyes filled with tears and her face turned into a mask of agony. At those times, my mother looked just like the addolorata. The addolorata, the sorrowful woman, was the name of a statue in the church across the street from where we lived, in the little town of Riposto in Sicily. It was a statue of Mary holding the dead Christ, a Sicilian version of Michelangelo's Pietà. The mother dressed in gold, embroidered purple silk, grief carved deeply into her painted face. In her lap, her dead son, red-stained, slender limbs draped in lifeless abandonment. People seemed as mournful when they looked at my mother holding me as they were when looking at the Addolorata holding her dead son. Sometimes I thought my mother and the Addolorata were one and the same. They even had the same name, Maria. So right from the beginning, Riposto, you see this feel this oppressive religious atmosphere with the church right across the street, where, by the way, my mother would take me to the nuns. They ran an elementary school there. And I'm a child and I don't understand, just all children, when they're told that they're made to feel that something is wrong with them. It doesn't matter, for me, it was the disability, but it could be that you're a bad boy, because you're always getting into trouble, whatever it is. It's a terrible feeling and very, very harmful. And the whole first chapter takes place in Riposto, where I live with my parents, and my grandparents. Actually, we all live together. My father, he was a wonderful man, and I adored my father. Both my parents are wonderful people. He had this idea that he needed to take me to America so I could be cured. Or at least that's the way I understood it, that if we went to America, I would be able to walk. He would say Italian doctors are too ignorant. They'll never find a cure. And he would tell me, in America, guarisci, which means that in America, you'll be cured. In America, cammini, you'll walk. I say, I always believed everything my father said. I wasn't sure how far America was or how we'd get there. But if that's where my father wanted to take me, that's where I go. And here is what I am. My life changed. I was already 13 by the time my father succeeded in bringing the family to America. I have no brothers or sisters, an only child. Now, of course, my father wanted me cured because he loved me, and I understand that. However, when you're growing up, and what I understood was that I was no good the way I was. That I wasn't the daughter my father wanted, that he wanted a daughter who could walk, and I couldn't walk. And all my life, I felt that I failed him because I'm see, I don't know, you can't see the wheelchair on Zoom, but I'm sitting in a wheelchair. I didn't get cured. So I felt that no matter what I did, what I accomplished, I don't know, in school or when I started teaching, and it wasn't that at that point I knew that where my father was coming from, that how much he loved me and that he was proud of me, but still there was always, you take it with you. To the point that when he was dying, I forced myself to walk on braces and crutches, even though it was very difficult for me at that point. Because I wanted his last image of me to be standing. It's strange how we are affected by the way we are treated when we're children, and the way the things our parents say to us. When I don't know, you want to ask me other questions, or should I go on talking? I can just talk.
Nadina, before we went live on Facebook, you raised an interesting point that some folks would describe the book Such a Pretty Girl as a biography, but you raised the point it's not your whole life story. It's not strict and, you know, exhaustive in that fashion. Would you mind sort of talking about that some more? The way that it's specific, it's about a certain topic and everything like that.
It's my life story seen through a certain lens, which is, you know, my disability, the disability movement. It's in chronological order. They usually tell you not to write a memoir in chronological order. But I felt that I wanted people to see my development, to see me change, because I go from being a victim, this poor little crippled girl, to an activist, you know, empowered and powerful. You know, I could, once I started getting arrested, I was arrested over and over again. I was never afraid to speak truth to power. So that transformation, how did it happen? And I thought that it was best to have the reader watch, you know, as they read, watch me change. And so I did it in chronological order. But yes, if you're gonna write a biography, you wanna put everything there that happened, and a lot of other stuff happened in my life. Yeah, we also talked about how can you remember it all? You know, you remember certain things. The memory is selective, of course, you know, you do a lot of making up of dialogue, for example. How are you going to remember all the words in a dialogue? You know, there's one sentence that you remember. The words of my father's words, in America guarisci, you know, I mean, those were like imprinted, you know, in my brain. And many others, you know, but then you have to, that's why it's creative nonfiction, really. That's what I wanted it to be. That's what I call it, creative nonfiction. And at times, you know, I played around a little bit so that it would flow. It would be easy to read, so that people could get really interested in the story and not want to put it down. So I wrote it in a way, the way you would write a novel, rather than, you know, a book about the disability rights movement, or a straight biography where, you know, you want to be factual, make sure that you give all the important things that happened to you in your life and the time and the, I didn't do that. As I said, you know, it's always through. Everything that I wrote was trying to show something. Of course, it is also my life, very intimately told. I mean, it is my life. So it is true. I'm not saying that I made it up. You know, it's true, but it's as true. It's kind of true with a capital T. You know, I go for the truth, but not necessarily factual. You know, so sometimes you know, I'll move. You know, may. Play around, like I said, play around a little bit to make it flow better, to make it so people don't lose interest. I wanted it to be an interesting story.
Well, it's certainly not dry. It's not like reading an encyclopedia. It is very I'm sorry if you have another question on your sort of docket, Jeffrey, but there was something that occurred to me while we were talking about the beginning of the book. In the second chapter, I've had conversations with other authors about writing very visceral or traumatic sequences. I wonder what the process was like and where in the writing process you got to writing the examination sequence or the surgery sequence in the second chapter, because those are two very, very painful moments. Obviously, it's unmistakable, but I wonder if it went through a lot of revision, if you came to it later, if there were some of the first things you wrote. How did you incorporate that type of material into the book?
I wrote that before I wrote the first chapter. When I was because I needed to write about those things. Those were very, very painful. Movement. It was very good to be in the hospital because I found community in the hospital. I met all the other disabled kids, but at the same time, I was tortured. It was certainly torture. I don't know what the doctors had in mind. They did torture many of us, most of us. They knew we couldn't be cured. The best I could do was learn to walk with crutches, but I mean, how far can you get? Yes, the one scene where I am just come from Sicily, I'm a shy little girl, and modesty was supposed to be a big virtue in Sicily, and here I am. There's a room full of doctors and medical students. I'm only 13 years old, and they stripped me naked, and I just closed my eyes to make them all disappear, like I wanted to disappear. They did that. They did that to all of us. I know they did it to Leslie. That was the way they were teaching the medical students and the young interns about how about our different disabilities and what could be done, what couldn't be done. But it was not what could be done for us so that we could have a better life. It was more like what could be done about this muscle, this weak muscle here, or this, this tendon that's too tight. Can we loosen it? Can we, so that's, so that it wasn't, we were not people. It was, we were not, we were children at the time. I was still a child. But in fact, the doctors would come and talk about us and as if we weren't even there. They didn't talk directly to us, they talked about us. And I know a lot of that is still going on, unfortunately. It's easier to do it to children because what are you going to do? You don't talk back. I did, but it was by accident. There's one funny scene there in the book. You're smiling, so I guess you remember it, where I want to say hello. How do you do to the doctors? Just, notice me. I'm here. I'm real. I'm a young girl here, and I'm learning English. And I wanted them to see me, and this roommate I had who knew a little bit of Sicilian that she had learned from her grandmother. So we could communicate, and I asked her, what should I say? And she told me, can I say it? Fuck you. And I did, to the doctors with a big smile. I didn't know what I was saying. And I thought, well, the other kids are gonna be, and the doctor just, they were shocked, and some of the younger ones kind of were, giggling, and then they just went on to talk, the way they were talking before. That's it. What's interesting is how all the other kids, instead of, I thought they would just laugh at me and say, oh my God, how embarrassing, how could you do that? They were like, I was a hero. Oh, I wish I was brave enough to do that. So there was this feeling against the doctors. It wasn't, but it was an instinctual kind of a gut feeling that here these doctors, and they're not really helping us that much, because we all knew in our hearts, minds, that we weren't going to be cured. They could do some things, to make you able to walk. Like I learned to walk, and then I kept breaking my leg, my knees, my ankle. So at the end, they ended up amputating my legs at the knees. But they also straightened my back, which wasn't a bad thing to do. I mean, with scoliosis gets bad enough, your lungs can get crushed. So that was something that was necessary, but it was certainly torture. And the way I describe it in the book, that's exactly the way it happened.
Thank you. We did have one question from the audience. Do you have more to go through, Jeffrey, right now?
Yeah, it might kind of derail the momentum, so I can come back to them, but
okay.
Go ahead.
So Elaine Kolb had the question, Nadina, you have tons, well, at least many pounds, shelves, and boxes of precious writing and collected materials. What are you doing to make sure your legacy will be preserved and available to others?
Well, I'm planning to go through what I have. I am always planning to go through how much I have. And of course, one problem is that physically I cannot do as much. And so I need help doing that. I also I moved many times, and unfortunately, a lot of not my writing, but I go to all the different demonstrations we organized. I was very creative doing flyers and signs. My very, very first sign that I made for the movement, and maybe I should, I will read a little bit about, discovering the movement after this. When I get, that's one thing I plan to do when I get back to New York, to start working on getting things, see how much I have and try. And also, of course, my husband, whom I met in the movement, Danny, he had an awful lot too. He accumulated a lot, and he was better at filing than me. I had started, when I started teaching, I remember I was filing all my quizzes and midterms and finals, and then I realized that, it's too much trouble it's easier to just do it over. But I do have an awful lot, but a lot of it also got lost when I was, got thrown out. I hope to do more writing, Elaine. I really do hope to do more writing. So I don't want this to be the only book. There's an awful lot that couldn't go in the book because the book had to be, so many. I wanted to keep it under 100,000 words. So there's a lot more. And I also have my speeches. By the way, I don't know if you look online, you'll find some of my speeches at rallies. I love to speak at rallies because I can just, yell and be very forceful. I spoke at the Women's March, and I spoken, many ADA rallies or Disability Pride. The last, that was the last one before the pandemic, because then we couldn't have marches or rallies, afterwards. You can find them on YouTube, some of them. So I'd like to put those together. And so I'll may need your help, Elaine, since you're asking this question. Because you can move better than I can. Because I do need, the physical help. And of course, Elaine is disabled also, but I volunteered to do good. Thank you, Elaine.
Hi, Nadina, since you've been speaking a lot about the movement, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how the disability rights movement has changed from the time you became a part of it in the 70s until now.
Okay. Maybe what I'll do is, should I read a little bit about when I first encountered the movement, joined the movement, which was at the very beginning, really. And then talk about how it has been changing, and today, yes, there have been a lot of changes. In fact, we don't even talk about disability rights today. The preferred term is disability justice. So, but this is a little bit from when I started going to meetings. It was amazing to discover how similar our experiences were once we started comparing notes. Until then, we all had considered our disabilities to be the problem. We believed we were supposed to cope as best we could. As we talked, we realized the disability itself was not that big of a deal for us. We had all learned to accept our physical limitations. What made life difficult was not the disability, but the lack of services and supports, the lack of accessibility, the unfair and stereotypical ways in which we were treated, the pity doled out for us all our lives. Often after a meeting, I wrote my thoughts down in a notebook. It's not my fault that I'm disabled, yet I've been made to feel that it is. I wrote, my polio never made me unhappy. People made me unhappy. Ever since I was a little girl, people have always made me feel I was no good because I was disabled. From the Sicilian women and the nuns to the doctors that couldn't fix me, to my fellow students, prospective employers, even my own parents. As I wrote, my tears fell and stained the pages, tears of anger, of relief, and of new hope. what I'm describing there, in a way, it's what we call the social model, where, you know, it's not so much the disability that makes us suffer, but the way we are treated because of the disability. Now, Leslie wants to know how things have changed. Well, one big change is that a lot of activism is going on online. You have to understand, when we first started, we were going to have a meeting, let's say. We had to type it up on a typewriter. And I'm talking about the 70s. And we mimeographed it. I remember that mimeograph machine. I'm old, you know, mimeograph machine with the smell was awful. And we made phone calls. It was at that time, you know, one thing I wanted to say about movements, because people, they always try to talk about, okay, who started the movement? And I don't believe any one person starts a movement. I think there may be one person that serves as a spark. But you have to have fertile ground, and you have to have all the people ready to, you know, who have been waiting for this moment to rise up. And by the way, in New York City, the spark was Judy Heumann, who sued the Board of Education when she was denied a license to teach because she had polio and used a wheelchair. And she sued the Board of Education. They settled, but she really won. And she also started Disabled in Action, which is this organization that's still in existence and still active in New York City. There were different Disabled in Actions in Syracuse. I don't know how many of them are still active, but certainly in New York, it is. And then there was on the West Coast, there was Ed Roberts, who was a quadriplegic due to polio also, and was went to Berkeley, had to sleep in an iron lung at Berkeley, and he's considered the father of independent living. Meaning really living outside of an institution, because at the time, people who were that disabled were institutionalized, and having control, you know, over your life. That's what independence, you know, meant. Having, you know, not being able to put on your shoes on your own, you know, like in the hospitals, rehab, they would try to teach you to do things for yourself. The idea was, it's much better if we get somebody to put those shoes on or the brace on or get us in a wheelchair. And so we can then go on and live our life, whether we're gonna go to work or school or whatever we're gonna do. But I don't want to say that those two, that they were the spark in a way, because there were so many of us and all over the country and even in England that were ready to rise up, to start a movement. And we had fertile ground, because I mean, we had the great civil rights movement and all. There were so many movements that were starting in the 60s and 70s. That was a time of movements. So we followed that example. So yeah, then it wasn't so easy to get together and for for a meeting. Now, activism, much activism is done online, Zoom meetings like this, for example, which makes it much easier for people who are disabled and may find it difficult to go someplace else. And it also spreads so fast that movements start with hashtags, right? Somebody uses the hashtag Me Too, and then all these other women start saying, yes, me too, me too, me too. I was abused, yes. So it's very different that way, certainly. Also, I said at the beginning that the word that's used today rather than disability rights is disability justice. Of course, language changes. At the time, everything was about rights, and we had rights, for women, and of course, gay rights, and we had even animal rights, and it was always rights. And now we tend to use the word justice, but it's also a bigger concept, wider, we talked about equal rights and equal opportunities. Today, we tend to say maybe we don't have to focus on being equal to those who are not disabled, but what we need to do is change the whole system that makes inequality possible between people with all kinds of differences. And we look at ableism, how ableism relates to other isms, other forms of oppression, racism, xenophobia, sexism, of course, queer and transphobia, and et cetera. And the word that we use most today is intersectionality, how everything intersects. And our own identity, we worked hard to build a common identity, a common disability identity. But now we're talking more about how our disability identity intersects with our other identities. My identity as an Italian American or Sicilian American, my identity as a feminist, my identity as certainly as an immigrant and as a teacher, but mainly has how these different systems of oppression all intersect, and disability intersects with all of them, because none of us is just disabled, you're disabled, I'm disabled, I'm a human, I'm a woman, so you are disabled and you're an immigrant, you're disabled and you're LGBTQ+, you're disabled and you're a person of color, and you're disabled and you're it could be so many other things. Those identities, those different identities all intersect. My own identity as a feminist, for example, intersects, is in a way in conflict at times with my identity as a disabled person. For example, I am, of course, pro-choice, I'm a feminist, and I would fight for a woman's right to end the pregnancy for whatever reason. At the same time, when I hear that a pregnancy has been ended because the fetus was disabled, would have been born with Down syndrome, for example, or spina bifida even, that hurts me, It makes me feel that those of us with disabilities it reminds me of how those of us with disabilities are valued less. It's just one little example. There's also there's also discrimination within. Like I have a friend, who says in the disability community, I was always discriminated against because I was gay, and in the gay community, I was always discriminated against because I was disabled. So it was and now also, very much like I was a second wave feminist, and of course the new wave, I don't know which wave it is at this point of feminism. She knows, she's got her daughter. Accuse us of, because the early feminists, the second wave, not so early because we had a earlier feminists, but the second wave feminists of being middle class and white and just dissatisfied with their lives, but and the same with disability. We're being accused, by the young activists today who are part of this second wave, for being white, Caucasian, having been well educated, had college degrees, most of the ones who started, who became leaders in the movement. Mostly male, though, the disability movement, more than other movements, had women leaders. We're being seen as just wanting to be, to join the mainstream, kind of to get a piece of the old American capitalist pie, rather than changing the world, which is really what I always wanted. In fact, in my speech in '93, and I haven't talked about Danny, but I think the time is about over. The little speech I make, I say, we will no longer try to change to fit the mold. Instead, we will destroy the mold and change the world to make it a just, welcoming place for everyone. So that was always my dream, well, what's the song? We all want to change the world. So it has, yes, it has changed, and I think change is good. In the beginning, we had nothing. We couldn't get out of our houses, or many were institutionalized, and quite a few still are. Many still are. And we're still trying to get people out of institutions, and those who were not institutionalized were stuck at home, and we didn't have the first fight was for accessible buses, for example, for lifts on the buses,
right?
Because so that we could go from here to there, because we didn't. we couldn't move. We were stuck. We didn't want to have to depend on our parents to drive us somewhere. Those of us who were able to drive, and I was one of the privileged ones, because I could use my arms with hand controls to drive a car. And that gave me so much freedom. The first time I was behind the wheel and I could move, you know. By the way, I say it gave me even more, you know, million times more freedom than the wheelchair, because I felt so wonderful the first time I used the wheelchair, because in Sicily, I was being carried. See how far back we can go and how things have changed, and how in my lifetime I've seen so many changes.
Yeah.
So back then, yes, those of us who were mobility impaired, and we were the ones who were in the leadership, while now that's not necessarily so. And we're trying with, you know, we want everyone to be part of this movement, at the same time maintaining their separate identity. So like I remember fighting to have everyone accept this disability identity. But now we tend to say deaf and disabled, because deaf people don't consider themselves disabled. They just consider themselves as users of a beautiful other language, and they have their beautiful culture. Neurodivergent people, you know, because in the past, for one thing, we were to begin with separated, you know, we were in separate communities. Now we're trying to be together, but at the same time, respecting and celebrating those differences, and acknowledging, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna, I remember way back writing an article about how, why don't deaf people, why do they have against the word disabled? They just bought into the, you know, the prejudice that disability is bad. But now I don't feel like that. I say, well, they are different than me. And that's beautiful. And we're all different. And that's beautiful. Who would want to be the same? Everybody, you know, imagine what a boring world this would be. So I don't know if there are more questions, whether we're done. I don't know. I'm trying to see what time it is. I think we're past 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I think we have to wrap it up. We can always, if you'd like, we could always share like your contact information if people want to get in touch with you with more.
Well,
questions.
you can get, you can go to NadinaLaSpina.com.
Yeah.
Have not updated. The NYU students really made the website. I have an older website under this disabilityculture.org. And I am on Facebook. I haven't been tweeting much, but I am on Twitter also. So you can email me. I mean, you'll see the, you know, there's a link to email me. Either at NadinaLaSpina.com or at disabilityculture.org. I mean, I'm happy, you know, people contact me on Facebook, and they really, you know, I'm always giving out my number, and I get into, you know, there are people that sometimes they ask for help. Other times they're so touched by the book. When I've been corresponding with a wonderful woman whose sister has cerebral palsy, and we really want to meet their upstate, not that far upstate, but I don't know, somewhere in the White Plains. So I'm very happy to, to meet people, to talk to people about the movement, about the writing, or if there are people who are writing about their own lives, I'm glad to give advice.
Thank you so much.
I thank both of you, Leslie and Nadina.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And then
Leslie.
I'll mention again that Nadina's book, both the physical copy and audiobook are available through the library. We have the book, and then through one of our e-resources, Hoopla, you can listen to the audiobook as well.
I don't know if it's going to show up. I guess it doesn't. Sorry.
So, and you could always contact the library if you need help getting access to those things.
Yep.
And I'll just briefly mention that our book sandwich in program is a program that's made possible through the library's foundation. All of our programs are free, and we've also over the last year we've gone fine free with our materials to make the library more accessible and equitable. So anybody feels so inclined, they could always give a donation to the Library Foundation. It's at our website, nhfpl.org/donate.
Yeah.
And it helps kind of our collections and our programs throughout the year. And then I'll just mention our next book sandwiched in is in 2 weeks, also on a Thursday at noon. And it's with the author Jake Halpern, who wrote the acclaimed graphic novel, Welcome to the New World. And you can find more about that on our website. We have a number of other exciting author talks coming up in the next couple of months.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for all the disability justice work. Thanks for fighting, and thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure.